It's time for Power Forwards on the historic best seasons in Pacers history. Who has the best season? Spoiler, it might not be the exact season you're thinking of, plus some recent guys. We'll get to all of it today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we are going back in time and doing the best Pacers seasons by an individual at the power forward position. I thought this one would be super fun because, in my opinion, or at least what I knew before starting doing this, was that the best individual season was very obvious. The best MVP finisher the Pacers ever had, the best All-NBA finisher the Pacers have ever had. Then I dug in, and I'm not as certain anymore. This exercise was super fun because a lot of the guys you think of when you think of the best Pacers power forwards ever, you know, the Davises, J.O., David West, Schrempf going back, they all were awesome for the Pacers. There's a reason they're thought of so fondly. And yet, discerning every single one of those players' best season with the Pacers is quite hard. That became a theme in this one in a way that wasn't really the case with other positions. Whereas for me, with Paul George, it was pretty easy to figure out his best combined regular season and postseason. Reggie was a little harder, but at least I could figure out his in some ways. Haliburton's was obvious. It's a lot harder for me with this one, especially more so with J.O. Then I thought, I don't want to dive right into J.O. first. Obviously, he has, by accolades, maybe the most impressive season in Pacers history, and we will get to him. But there's a couple things I want to clear up, and then some names I just want to toss in the ring before we get into the top five. One thing that I had to really grapple with that I wanted to decide, do I want to do that for this episode or not, was actually Domantas Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis was, what do you call him, right? For those of you who watched the Pacers all those years, and he's clearly the center on offense, right? Screen setter, bully around the basket, handoffs. Every pick and roll was him. But he was clearly a 4 on defense because they wanted Turner's strengths to be rim protection and him defending pick and rolls and all stuff like that. What do you call that guy? Do you call one of them the 4 and one the 5? Do you just call them both 5s? With historic context, it would have been harder for me to do for a season I didn't cover, and I might have just defaulted to basketball reference positions like I have for everyone else. In this case, I'm putting both Turner and Sabonis as centers because they just are. They did like. I know what their position says on basketball reference, especially in Sabonis' case, they use the 4. I'm putting them in the 5s, right? I might have messed up with some other players by doing it that way that I didn't cover or watch as much, but I think very clearly in that case, they're both 5. So you won't hear from Sabonis today. You'll very obviously hear from him in the centers episodes. That one was tough. Siakam, I want to talk about Siakam for a second because, look, he only has half a season plus a postseason with the Pacers. But by like win shares and some other advanced stats, he had like a pretty close to top 10, if you double his win shares, because that's a cumulative stat, or you just look at his BPM, pretty close to a top 10 season last year and had the good playoffs. It's not a top 5 season, obviously. I don't think anyone's putting Siakam in that echelon yet. But with a training camp under his belt, with more time to learn the Pacers' defensive scheme, with actually fully healthy Haliburton, knock on wood for the Pacers to start the season, it's not inconceivable to me that he could get there. It's a high bar. This is a pretty good top 5. The drop from 5 to like 6 is big, and even like 7 to 8. So I think he could definitely get into the top 10 pretty easily. Top 5 might be hard, but it's reasonable to me. He's pretty dang good. And the impact stats said a lot last year. The hardest guy for me to grade out was by far Antonio Davis. I always am calling on people who covered or watched or just really in tune with the team back, when I was too young to know this stuff. And it's funny enough that those people have been the ones enjoying this series the most. A lot of people have reached out about really liking these. Thank you. Antonio Davis was very hard for me because he was very obviously good and impactful. His best seasons came with the Raptors, obviously, but was still so valuable off the bench for those Pacers teams, right? Especially the team that everyone considers probably the best Pacers team ever in 97, 98, right? And was good in the postseason too and had big moments and was this just like necessary enforcer type that these good teams had back then. And every time I talk to someone about those Pacers teams, they are very excited to talk about Antonio Davis and what he meant to those teams, Right? I can't write that off. Right? I have this problem with a lot of other guys that I've talked about all the time, where it's like everybody who talks about them says they were awesome, but it's really hard for me to parse through. Like, this looks to me, from the minimal but some amount of Antonio Davis full games I've watched, plus diving into the historical context, this looks like somebody who's in like the 8 to 10 range for best Pacer seasons at the 4. If you listening disagree or think I'm dumb when the list is over, please let me know, because he was very hard for me to actually rank in this exercise, even though everybody else came out at least somewhat easy. And this should be in this tier, this should be in that tier, whatever. A couple other guys I want to talk about before we really get into the top 5. One is a guy that I think people don't realize how good he was for one season, and that's Troy Murphy. Troy Murphy on the not very exciting or fun Pacers teams of the late 2000s, just before 2010 and before, right as Granger was really peaking. That team had some names and some interesting guys, but weren't very good. Troy Murphy in 2008-2009 averaged 14.3 points per game, 11.8 rebounds per game, 2.5 assists. Was not a good defender, but shot 45% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. This was 15 years ago. That player would be spectacular in the current NBA. Troy Murphy on this Pacers team would be a godsend for them. That kind of shooting and rebounding together. And this is one of those things that always makes me talk about impact stats, because his role was to rebound and shoot, and he did it at a by far career best level. That was his only season. I guess later in his career, when he took 1-3 per game, he shot 41.8% for the Lakers. But in terms of seasons, he actually was like playing real minutes. That was by far his best shooting season. Only time he shot over 40% from 3 was that season, and he got to 45 on like very significant attempts, right? Fantastic shooting season. And that was one of his roles. And his other one was rebounding, and he was great at it. And so if you're very good, if you're asked to do things and you're very good at those things, impact stats are going to love you, even if those things are not as hard as creating shots and stuff like that. So his impact stats are awesome. Like in win shares, this season is 7th in Pacers history. Clearly not the 7th best season by a 4, but it's really, really good. BPM also says it's tied for 6th and 0.1 points behind 5th. Again, clearly not that level, but a very, very good season. And I did not think I'd get to talking about Troy Murphy today, but that season in particular, where he was just red hot and hitting the glass, and a great modern player, 61.4% true shooting on decent usage, above average defensive box plus minus, although I watched enough Troy Murphy to not be like, meh. I think the rebounding pulling that up a bit, but that is a pretty dang good season. Another guy I don't know much about, mostly because he only played one season for the Pacers. It was Slick Leonard's final season as head coach, the great Slick Leonard, was Mickey Johnson, aka Rubber Band Man. Spent one season with the Pacers in 1979-80, and averaged 19 points and 8.3 rebounds per game. Outscored the great Dennis Johnson that season for a not good Pacers team. They won 37 games. They did not make the playoffs. He never played for the Pacers again. But those stats are really good. That was his career high in points, and one of his better seasons in rebounding. In fact, he never hit 8 rebounds per game ever again after that season that he had. Also, I apologize. I'm doing something different this time when I'm putting the stats on a different monitor, so I'm going to be looking around a lot for those of you on YouTube. But I think that's a really good statistical season. I very rarely even heard of him, especially not in a Pacers context. So I know it wasn't so dominant that people talk about him for forever or have this crazy perception of what he was. But that's really good from a numeric perspective, and he has to be on this part of the discussion, but not in the top 5. The top 5 is all names that you're going to expect and know, from accolades to dominant seasons to being very key players on some of, if not the best Pacers teams we've ever seen. You know the names. What's the order? What's the best season for these guys specifically? I think that alone is a very hard exercise. Let's hop right in. Before we get to that, though, we've got to talk about the good folks over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel here on Locked On Pacers because they are America's #1 sportsbook. Well, guess what? We've got something a little different for you now, because right now, through September 22nd, so the next 19 days, all FanDuel customers can bet $5. Just do that. Just bet $5. You'll get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Free 3 weeks. And if you have a YouTube TV based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season afternoon out of market game. You just need a Google account, current form of payment. Boom, you're in. 3 free weeks. watching your favorite team. If that's the Colts, because it's a Pacers podcast, there you go. You can cancel anytime to get that offer. You just got to visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook, 3 free weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket with a $5 bet. FanDuel.com. Check them out today. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Celtics. They made a move last week. I didn't really plug this as the second listen. Lonnie Walker. How is he still a free agent and getting an Exhibit 10 deal from Boston? That's crazy. He's actually good. Him and Markelle Fultz are the two guys that I'm still like, what? They're not on a team at all? That's crazy. We'll see what happens there. Markelle Fultz, Celtics. Listen to Locked On Celtics for more on an actually decent player signing just before September. Pretty wild to see it shake out like that. You know the names for the best Pacers power forwards ever, right? David West, Jermaine O'Neal, Dale Davis, Detlef Schrempf. I just said his name wrong. Apologies. What is the order, though? That is really hard to decide. Like, they all had seasons that you could rank different factors in different ways and come away saying that was their best season with the Pacers. I actually think the most I don't know. I was about to say that what I think the most straightforward player to decide is Dale Davis. And I don't even know if I mean that as I'm about to say it, right? That you could do a lot of things here. And J.O. is really fascinating too. We'll get to him at the end, because what I had thought for a long time was his best season was maybe not his best season with the Pacers, but there is a key separator that probably makes it the case. So let's start at 5 and we'll work our way up to Mr. Jermaine O'Neal in some order. At number 5, Dale Davis. What a guy, what a player, what an enforcer. So for those of you unaware, Dale Davis with the Pacers for a very long time was an all-star in 1999-2000. So that was the year the Pacers made the finals, and he was good in the playoffs too, right? Which is very important to me. Played all 23 games, was a beast on the glass. So regular season-wise, his stats were very similar his whole career because his role was very similar for a lot of the time. Start at 4, go make stuff happen. And he was routinely just like a 10-9 kind of guy, right? One year, specifically, when his minutes were ironically a career high, which was 1993-94, and relatedly, the first year Detlef Schrempf was not on the Pacers, which allowed Dale Davis's role to expand that year. He got 4th in most improved player. That year, he averaged 11.7 points and 10.9 rebounds per game, but his field goal percentage was the lowest it ever was with the Pacers. But they made the playoffs and played a lot of games, and he averaged 8 and 10 in the postseason. So you could say that the accolade of being pretty high in the most improved player ballot and his best statistical regular season with the Pacers and a good playoffs makes that Dale Davis's best season. And I would say, yeah, that's a good argument. I hear it out. But I think that similar to Jalen Rose, although not in the exact same vein, because Rose was amazing in the finals, I think for me and for the 5th best power forward season, I'm choosing Dale Davis in 1999-2000. That was his all-star year. His only one, well-deserved. I mean, when you're like that rock solid for so long, they just like give you an honorary one. But he deserved it anyway, obviously. Really good player that year. He was 0.1 rebounds away from averaging a double-double. In fact, statistically, he was exactly 11 rebounds away in 74 games from getting it. So close to his 2nd ever season averaging a double-double. But again, made All-Star that year. So it's very good on the glass. Upped his blocks by quite a bit over prior seasons while averaging under 30 minutes per game. Kept his turnovers down, kept his fouls at a reasonable level, shot over 50% from the field. And then in the playoffs, as the Pacers made it to the finals, remember, that was their best in terms of outcome season. Played all 23 games, shot it well from the field, 8 points per game, 11.4 rebounds per game, his best postseason success there. I think that was his best season in total, including the postseason, even though the Pacers were pretty good, obviously in the 1994 playoffs, but did not make the finals, even though that team was pretty good there too. And his stats were good, but better in 2000. I'm giving the nod to his all-star season. He had the year the Pacers in 98, which many people consider the best Pacers team ever. He was also great in the playoffs, but I think the combo of regular season accolades and success and postseason success, 1999-2000 was Dale Davis's best season to me. Again, please chime in if you disagree. And I'm putting him 5th on this list, although his other season I mentioned is an honorable mention among the many honorable mentions that include Troy Murphy and Antonio Davis. Detlef Schrempf. Oh boy, this one was really hard, really hard. Man, what a career he had with the Pacers. So fascinating to come in from this guy who was like, okay, he was all right with the Mavs. And then, oh my gosh, this guy's awesome for the Pacers. Like instantly top 6 in most improved player, 6th man of the year twice, and was 1 spot away from 3 years in a row. The 3rd year of that, he got MVP votes. And yet I still don't think the MVP vote season was his best, but this one's hard, right? So the Pacers didn't get deep into the playoffs or even win around until the year after they traded Schrempf to Seattle, right? So he never had an awesome playoff success season to really like poke at and say that's the one, right? Because in 1992 playoffs, the Pacers played 3 games and lost. They were out, right? That's a sweep back then. They played best of 5s. The Celtics kicked their butt. In that series, Detlef Schrempf averaged 21 points and 13 rebounds per game. That's insane. He shot it poorly. He was at 38% from the field. And the very next season, he was close in scoring and shot more efficiently. In the 1990 playoffs for the Pacers, they got swept that year too, but he averaged 20 and 7 that year and shot it efficiently. So, like, had better playoffs than that from an efficiency perspective, but not a statistical perspective. So none of his playoffs, they all kind of come out in the wash to me. So the deciding factor for Detlef Schrempf is what season was his best in the regular season, right? And so much ambiguity on front court positions back at this time too, between, whatever you want to call it, 3, 4, 5 at the time. But anyway, for Detlef Schrempf, the season he started, I think, is going to be my answer for this. Again, I would like people from who were more around back then to tell me if I'm wrong. So 1992-93, Detlef Schrempf, all-star for the first time, 19 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. Very good season, obviously. Not a lot of playoff success. The year before that, he came off the bench and played 5 fewer minutes per game, yet averaged more rebounds and averaged 17.3 points per game and shot 6% better from the field. Those are really hard to separate. Impact stats say his best season was 92-93. Pretty much every impact stat says that's the case. Looking on paper, that looks like the case coming off the bench. So the all-star season versus the getting MVP votes and winning 6th man season with a little worse stats, but a smaller and different kind of role. I opted for, I think, with enough historical context. And again, I watched some Detlef Schrempf. I obviously wasn't even alive to know the conversation around the team at the time. I think 1991-92 Detlef Schrempf was his best season with the Pacers, and I'm putting that 4th on this power forward list. Man, was it tough to discern his. I mean, they're all good. What an awesome player. Another like Troy Murphy situation where if he was playing today, oh man, would he be good. Man, oh man, would he be good. Perfect modern 4, right? Just moves the ball, shoots it well. Oh, he was awesome. He also was awesome for Seattle, made an All-NBA team there. 2 more All-Star teams. Just a really great player. But it was hard for me to pick his best season with the Pacers. And again, they traded him, and then immediately the next year they make the conference finals, right? So he didn't get that. If he had a run like that with the regular season, that'd be the winner. So I'm going with 91-92 for Detlef Schrempf. That one was pretty hard. Number 3 for me on the best power forward seasons list. I think this will be controversial. I think people might say that Detlef should be ahead of the guy that I'm about to say. Number 3 for me, Mr. David West. What David West season? Another tricky one, but this one was probably the most straightforward of the deciding which season of a guy should be ranked this high. David West, obviously with the Pacers, the first year he plays in every game, but doesn't have the scoring. And then later he's got better defense and better efficiency, but his scoring is a little lower. How do you sort this out? It's very easily 2012-13. Like the year after that, when he hit the clutch shot against the Hawks in the playoffs against Pero Antic, that series was excruciating in retrospect. Like that was a huge shot, and he was good in the playoffs for the Pacers all the time. But his stats were pretty similar in his first 2 postseasons with the Pacers. Scoring was 0.6 apart, rebounds 0.9 apart, pretty similar shooting percentages, right? Great postseason player. And I've made this point before, even about the modern Pacers, but my playoff take is if you maintain your stats from the regular season to the playoffs, you're actually playing better because it's harder to maintain your stats. Playoffs is a harder setting. So that's actually more impressive, right? And his stats easily maintained into the playoffs, including his efficiency. So I think it's fairly clear that David West's best Pacers season was 2012-13, right? That was the year that he got over 17 points a game, played his most minutes with the Pacers that year, obviously. But Almost 3 assists, almost 8 boards. Didn't turn it over that much. Good defender, brute force, good finisher. Sprinkled in a 3 here and again, but everybody knows what made David West so good. The enforcer type, tough guy type, but was awesome. Just a spectacular player. I think it's awesome that he got to win 2 championships with Golden State to end out his career. But in terms of offensive impact stats, including the years he was an all-star in New Orleans, a lot of impact stats say that 2012-13 was his best offensive season of his career, like no doubt. And I think that that's pretty obvious, even looking back at it. Even though he averaged more points per game those years, he was like less efficient and just a different type of player, even though he was an all-star in the most improved conversation a couple times. But his defense was better in New Orleans. But it was still very good with the Pacers. And then in the playoffs, obviously, as they were very close to the finals that year, 1 game away, all 19 games, he averaged 16 and 7.5 on pretty good efficiency and played, of course, a critical role in that era of Pacers basketball because those teams were so good. And David West was such a key part of them. I put this 3, but I really think Schrempf has something to say about me making that decision. Both terrific players, but the playoff success was my tiebreaker here. But I think that in terms of individual skills, Schrempf might have been higher. I would, again, like to hear from people who watched a lot of both of them to know that. And the Davises are just behind, and Troy Murphy's and all those other guys I said. But I think those 3 round out the bottom of the top 5. The top of the top 5, you already know who the name is, but what season should be ranked higher? You're going to hear me talk about it and kind of think out loud, even though I'm pretty sure I have my answer, as we close out today's show with some Jermaine O'Neal. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. You everyday listeners are the best. I really appreciate it. Make your second listen. There's not a lot of actual news in the NBA these days. In fact, the biggest news was the TJ McConnell extension becoming official today. By the way, most of my predicted details were close enough that Monday's podcast still holds pretty well. His cap hit's a little higher in the first year, but team option on the last year, partial guarantee, as I predicted would be the case given the way he's aging and the Pacers contract history. But Ivica Zubac also got extended the day after McConnell, and that became official on me talking today, you listening yesterday. Locked On Clippers for more on that. I like Zubac quite a bit. I think that's a pretty good deal for LA. Let's keep going. The best season by a 4 in Pacers history. It's obviously Jermaine O'Neal, right? Before you clicked on this episode, you knew that. You knew that was the answer. But which season? And a lot of you are going, you dummy, you idiot. Tony, he made All-NBA second team in 2004. And no Pacer has ever done that since or before that. A lot of Pacers guys, PG, Tyrese, Vic, others have made third team All-NBA. No one has made second team except for J.O. in 2003, 2004. That's true. You're totally right. Third in MVP. Third, by far the highest by a Pacers player. That year, MVP voting, KG first, Tim Duncan second, J.O. third. And if you just go off first place votes, J.O. got second. He got 2, KG got 120, and Peja Stojakovic got 1. Really not a good year for MVP voting when Peja's getting 4th, but doesn't matter. Historic context, and Peja was very good, to be clear, that year. He averaged 24 points a game. But J.O. third in MVP. Insane how good he was this season. I'm not diminishing that at all. Third in MVP, All-NBA second team. Pacers accolades, that is the top. That if you didn't talk about the stats of the season or how the season went, that's it. That's number 1, right? Awesome year. His third time All-Star. His second season with the Pacers, wins most improved, as is a theme with many guys for the Pacers. All-Star, All-NBA third team. That year he averaged 19 and 10.5. That's not even in his top 2. And the Brawl year, he only played 44 games, and obviously the Brawl year, you're not getting credit for a good season. And then had 2 more All-Star years that weren't as good as his peak in the pre-Brawl days. Some injuries there too. He got 10th in Defensive Player of the Year in 2006, 2007. So one thing I got a faux pas is I knew J.O. was a fine defender, but in doing some of this research, and I found a full J.O. game to watch on YouTube, thankfully, he's a better defender than I remembered. A good defensive, a pretty damn good defensive player in a way that I didn't remember. And that also props him up very high on these lists because in my head, for some reason, he was like a dominant offensive guy and a really good rebounder and like a pretty good defender. No, he was really good defensive player through that whole stretch. So 6 straight all-star seasons, all with the Pacers, second team All-NBA, most improved, right? What makes this hard? Because the other thing that makes me feel stupid for debating this. So 2002, 2003, that is he averaged 20.8 points per game, his highest in a full season. The Brawl year was higher. That's his highest scoring number in a full season for the Pacers. 10.3 rebounds is his second best rebounding average, only behind the year before when his scoring wasn't as high, when he won most improved, but that year he averaged 10.5, right? And then the 2003 playoffs happened. Now, let me tell you something about the 2003 playoffs. I don't know how much credit to give J.O. in the 2003 playoffs. Pacers played the Celtics in the first round. They lost in 6 games. So they didn't even win a round. Jermaine O'Neal in that series against the Celtics averaged 22.8 points and 17.5 rebounds. 17.5 rebounds per game. 3 blocks. What am I looking at? What are these numbers? Insane. They lost. So the team part of that doesn't hit as hard. But what we're looking at here is his best scoring full season with the Pacers, All-NBA third team, All-Star, 21 points per game. Phenomenal year. The following year is the year he got the crazy good accolades. And again, by accolades, the best season for the Pacers. But a little down in the scoring and a little down in the rebounding and 5% worse field goal percentage. He shot 48.4% in 2002-2004 and 43.4% the following year. Similar number of games, only a 1-game difference. Very similar efficiency numbers across the board. In fact, statistically in every way, extremely similar. And then the playoffs happened. And that year's Pacers team, no one wants to remember that Pacers series. Everybody says this could have been the best Pacers team ever. Probably it was up there. 99 and 2000, 98, and 2000 have something to say about it. They lost to the Pistons in the conference finals. That could have been it. They beat the Celtics. They got over that bugaboo. They swept them, right? And J.O. in that playoffs shot 42%. The year before, he shot 46 when he was insane. 19 points and 9 boards. Good. Very good, to be clear. That whole team was awesome as they got 2 games from the finals. So playing more in the playoffs but having worse stats, what's better, right? The team success should matter more, I think. And what's better in those regular seasons that are very close, but one year's way more efficient and maybe a little bit better defense. But then the next year he gets third MVP and second in All-NBA. I'm probably overthinking this because there's a lot of stuff that's like, hey, 2002, 2003 might have been J.O.'s best season with the Pacers, but I'm not going to do it. I just can't. I can't do that. I can't look you in the eyes and say that compared to the rest of the league, he was better in 03-04 than he was in 02-03, even though maybe you could argue he was a better player the year before. What you are compared to the rest of the league matters, and the team success has to matter. I've made it matter a lot in these tiebreakers. I just said I made it a key tiebreaker in the David West Detlef Schrempf discussions, and I think many of you will think I'm wrong for that decision. So I have to make it the same tiebreaker here. So I actually think it's closer than I realized, and I hope it's closer than some of you realized, that his season where he got third in MVP, 2 first place votes for a Pacers player. Unheard of. I don't know if that, I'd have to check if that's ever happened before. Besides that, third in MVP, second team All-NBA, crazy talented, all-star, pre-brawl, 20 and 10 every night. Team makes the conference finals. That's got to be number one. With apologies to the season before where he was more efficient, got more rebounds, scored more points, and had better stats in a shorter playoff run, I just have to go with the team success and heavy accolades compared to the rest of the league season. So the obvious answer does end up being the answer. The best power forward season in Pacers history was Jermaine O'Neal in 2003-2004 in a close race with himself from the year prior. I did watch J.O. My family moved to Indy right at the end of his time. So not a ton of him, but I did watch him on TV and stuff growing up. If you watched a lot of him or know the context better than me or think I'm stupid for even thinking these seasons are close, or you think maybe 2001, 2002 should have got more buzz here, let me know. This was hard, as it was for a lot of these guys. Detlef, very hard. What was his best season? Dale Davis, very hard. What was his best season? J.O., what was his best season with the Pacers? David West was a little easy. Troy Murphy was comically easy. Mickey Johnson and Antonio Davis had good peaks, but This was a hard discussion. Let me know what you think. The final result: first Jermaine O'Neal 02. First Jermaine O'Neal 0304, then Jermaine O'Neal 0203, then David West in 2013, Detlef Schrempf in 1992, and Dale Davis in 2000. Tomorrow on this year podcast, Will Furr returns for our second year of our over-unders that I make up and make him decide on. We will review what we did last year and how we did and look ahead at ones I make up for this year. Again, like other exercises, hopefully I beat Will because I lost to Jimmy Cook in the what are the odds, and I lost to Adam on the schedule. None of that's happening this year. And then Friday, we're going to do how new guys can help part 2. Last time we did James Wiseman, Quentin Jackson, and Cole Swider, the NBA guys. This time we'll do the rookies: Johnny Furphy, Tristan Newton, and Enrique Freeman. I'll be out of town from Thursday through Sunday, so that will be pre-recorded. And next Monday's episode will probably be pre-recorded. I'm only telling you that because if news breaks between now and then, I'm actually out of town for something extremely fun. I won't be able to jump on it very quickly. So apologies. Hopefully that's not the case. And then back to normal scheduled programming next Tuesday. Thank you guys for listening today, especially those of you who are really loving this series. I'm really loving doing it, which is really important. 2 more to go, centers, and then all positions. Till then, everybody, see ya tomorrow.